Hey guys, what's up? So I'm getting a little annoyed about this whole George Floyd situation. I know he died in something that shouldn't have happened in America, but now you've got protests happening within London. That's where I'm currently based, and obviously you're not going through social distancing. I think that the UK has a tendency of trying to follow things from the US, which might not be as applicable. Yes, we do have problems sometimes with overzealous police officers. In our case, it tends to be more to do with stop and search. We don't have so much on the gun violence. We have more restrictive measures, and it's more difficult to get a license in the first place. Saying that you can get them for things like clay pigeon shooting, but normally it has to be for a specific purpose. We tend to have just a stop and search as more of an issue. For anyone who isn't aware, stop and search is where the police officer will randomly search the individual, pat them down to see if they're carrying anything, say like knives, guns, drugs, anything lethal on them. And yes, there is the whole thing that certain people are considered to be searched more than others. It tends to be black people more than white people. From my point of view, that's not so much of an issue. You could think, oh, I'm being kind of picked out of a crowd more easily. But really, unless if you just comply with stop and search, it's over after a few minutes. Only those police officers who are a little bit rogue will take that kind of any further or try and provoke you. This is a completely different situation that's happening in America, where an officer actually stepped on the person's neck, causing them to suffocate. They couldn't breathe anymore, and not only did they pass out, they ended up dying as a result. Those kind of tactics aren't used in the British police. Um, Most of the time, when an happens, either you'll have more police officers at the scene to kind of forcefully arrest the person. Sometimes they do use, like, for example, a spit hood, which is considered a bit controversial, because sometimes when they arrest individuals, they will kind of spit and bite or do anything to try and cause people to kind of these officers to suffer. This is especially a concern at the moment with the coronavirus, as if they spit and bite, potential to infect is a greater risk. Um, those spit hoods have been used in the past, but I don't think they're used as heavily. They're also considered to be one of those problems where they see it as more happening to kind of black communities rather than any other community. Again, I don't. If you don't spit and you don't bite, then it's not necessary for them to do that. You start doing that, you get the results you have. Uh, Most people, if they're causing trouble, will be kind of pepper sprayed, or at most they'll get tasered. So that's kind of our situation. There is the argument that tasering can be quite lethal in itself. It damages kind of like the heart rhythm, and actually doing that can lead to someone inducing into a heart attack. If they have a weaker heart naturally, or they're in a if they've had a heart attack before, they're more susceptible to it. But that's not the case with this. That's just from a UK context. We're now seeing thousands of people are gathering across central London. So this was mainly Trafalgar Square yesterday to protest against the killing of an unarmed black man by police in the US. They held up signs saying "Justice for George Floyd, who died in police custody," while an officer kneeled on his neck to pin him down. Jarrett Chauvin has been charged with his murder in Minneapolis. The white police officer has been sacked from his job. During the protests, Met police officers have arrested 5 people. The protests have been held at Trafalgar Square and outside the US Embassy in Battersea. Elsewhere in the UK, hundreds marched through Manchester city centre chanting Black Lives Matter, and a similar protest also took place in Cardiff. London protesters held up placards saying racism has no place and "I can't breathe," a reference to Mr. Floyd's words during his arrest. The Met Police said officers were present and were engaging with those in attendance, adding an appropriate policing plan is in place. Police arrested 5 people aged between 17 and 25 outside the US Embassy. 3 of the arrests were for breaching COVID-19 legislation, and 2 were for assaulting police. Those arrested remained in police custody for questioning. Reverend Sally Hitchener, Associate Vicar at St. Martin in the Fields Church on Trafalgar Square, said she could see hundreds gathered for the protest from her workplace. "I'm very sympathetic to the issue, but also surprised to see the strength of emotion that has gathered people together," she said. "Clearly they're not following lockdown and social distancing, but I think there's a huge amount of passion there, and that's overriding their concerns. It's an issue that requires passion, but at the same time there's a huge amount of risk in what they're doing." She said police appeared to be moving the crowd on from the square by early afternoon. Protesters made their way to the embassy by marching along roads near the River Thames. Traffic was stopped in several places, and protesters were applauded by onlookers. A large portion of the crowd stopped under a railway bridge outside Battersea Park Station. 4 men climbed on top of a bus stop before getting down on one knee, and with their right arms in salute in silence, leading the gathered crowd to do the same. It is a stance made by Tommy Smith, the US sprinter, who famously raised his fist in protest against racial discrimination during his gold medal ceremony at the 1968 Olympics. American football player Colin Kaepernick caused outrage when he held a pose during the US anthem as a protest against racial injustice. Tens of thousands of people have joined nightly protests across the US since the death, with at least 1,600 people arrested in 22 cities, as some demonstrations descended into violence. Hundreds of people marched through Peckham in South London on Saturday in protest against police brutality. It comes as the US has been rocked by protests over the past 5 days, many of which turned into violence, with cars and buildings set alight and riot police using tear gas and rubber bullets. My biggest concern is that people aren't adhering to the social distancing. Yes, I can see that it's not fair from the Americans' point of view that this is going, but this is less of a UK problem. We always get blamed for interfering in other countries' affairs, and I think, generally speaking, we should just be keeping our noses out of it. It's not our business to dictate our terms or what we think is right within the US, and actually trying to support it. You could be actually causing the campaign to be sidetracked and to be damaged. If you have individuals that are fighting in the same way as people are in the US, then you risk having losing the right to that cause, and people to stop looking and caring about that cause for the sake of some individuals. I cite, because this is obviously the Black Lives Matter campaign, that message could be lost if you do that. There was a situation in 2011 to do with an individual who was, I think they were killed. And what ended up happening was there was a summer of riots. People were looting in the UK, especially in London. There were lots of areas that were hit. I remember the police were very stringent about do not put stuff on social media, because If you do, then you're aggravating the offence. You're actually inciting looting within these areas. My area almost got targeted, and I remember for a couple of days actually they kind of locked down our high street. If you don't want this type of thing to happen and for the police to be as heavy-handed as they are, I would suggest you need to back off. Especially, I would say, in America, where the guns are, ready to be used on the public. Don't give the police any more reason to do what they are currently doing. Otherwise, you might not be living for that much longer. As for the UK, I don't agree with joining in this campaign, just because it's not our fight. It's not for us to decide. It's not for us to dictate. We might speak the same language as the Americans, but our culture is quite different. How we deal with things is completely different. And actually, I am very concerned from this whole social distancing thing, because people haven't been doing that. The risks of the virus having a second spike are all but certain. We had our spike in mid-April, but definitely we're going to now have a second spike. They say usually it takes about a month to see the true impact of what the virus could do, and because of the people who have overcrowded within the several cities that I've mentioned, Manchester, Cardiff and London, especially London, we can pretty much guarantee there's going to be a massive peak in deaths. Well, today is the 1st of June. If it's going to be about a month, by the start of early July, we could be into a second lockdown. Thank you to the idiots who are doing this. You are causing the rest of us to suffer. And my only thing is, I want legal action taken against those who have done this. I think this isn't fair. My dad is currently shielding, and generally speaking, I have to collect my stuff from a different property, as I've just finished university. My biggest concern is that I'm not going to be able to kind of collect my stuff, and I'm going to have to still pay into a system where I'm no longer receiving the benefit just because my stuff is down there and I can't get access to it due to a second lockdown. If that happens, these people just need to be locked away and fined, and I want compensation for the idiots who cause a second spike in the virus. What do you guys think about this problem? Do you think it's something that the UK should get involved in, or is this something that we should actually just be staying out of? Like I've mentioned before, our situation with the police is a bit different. If for anyone who isn't aware, I'm not black, I'm mixed race. I'm kind of, my mum's on the Scottish side, my dad's Sri Lankan, so I am part Asian and European, British born. So I am being mixed race. This doesn't really impact me. I've never actually had a stop and search. Whatever you think, leave your comments down below. Like or dislike the video. I don't mind on this one. I just like to see what your thoughts are.